Carpenters close to you. Take one.
Around the world and into your home. The stories that touch your life. With Linda Winters. This is 2030.
Good evening and welcome to 2030 Sunday. I'm Linda Winters. In the mid-1980s, filmmaker Todd Haynes had an audacious, some would say blasphemous, idea. Create a biopic of beloved songstress Karen Carpenter, starring not actors, but dolls. Superstar chronicles the meteoric rise of the sibling pop duo known as Carpenters, who were launched to the top of the charts in the 1970s thanks to Karen's smooth vocals backed by Richard's heavenly arrangements. But behind the band's squeaky clean image were painful realities. In 1983, Karen's private struggle with anorexia nervosa led to her untimely, tragic death at the age of 32. What began as a 43-minute student film became an underground sensation. Haynes' unflinching look at the life of Karen Carpenter, her illness, the context in which she became famous, and the demands society places on women earned praise from critics, but not everyone enjoyed it. Before long, the film was banned. Tonight, the true story behind the film's disappearance, from the conception of his groundbreaking work to the nightmare legal battle that has threatened to keep Superstar from the public view for good. Our story begins at Bard College in the summer of 1985, where Todd Haynes was enrolled in an MFA program. He and his good friend Cynthia Schneider moved to New York after graduating from Brown University. And because they shared interests in pop culture, art, identity politics, and activism, the pair began to discuss working together on a project.
We just started talking about some sort of collaboration. I originally thought we should make an animal movie like Lassie or something. It was Todd who came up with the idea of using Barbie dolls.
I saw this promotional black and white little trailer on television, a vintage piece from TV from the 50s that introduced the Barbie to the American public. And it had a little miniature interior scene with the dolls sitting around the living room, and then Barbie came in and showed Midge in her new dress.
Surprise! It's Midge, Mattel's marvelous new teenage doll.
And it also intercut with live action. A little girl opened up a mailbox, shot from inside the mailbox, getting her Barbie fan club mail. And I was really intrigued with this idea of doing a fairly straightforward narrative, drawing on pre-existing popular forms, but simply replacing real actors with inanimate objects, with dolls. And being very careful with it and detailed in such a way that it would provoke the same kind of identification and investment in the narrative as any real movie would.
So when did the idea for the Carpenters come into the picture?
One day I was at some cafe in the West Village in New York. All of a sudden a Carpenter song came on the radio. I hadn't thought about the Carpenters since Karen Carpenter died of anorexia only a few years earlier. For our generation, the music played a strong role in our childhoods. I remember being on vacation with my family in 1970 and everybody loving Karen Carpenter, young women evoking her.
All these memories came back to you then?
The Carpenter song took me back to them, but it now had a whole new coloration. Hearing it again, knowing she had actually suffered, and seeing it all through the historical prism of the 1970s, post-Watergate, post-Vietnam, post-feminism, gay liberation, it felt like such rich and complicated territory to explore in a movie. I called up Cynthia and said, we have to do the Karen Carpenter story with dolls. And she instantly agreed. We're the same age, we loved that music as kids.
On December 4th, 2024, it was revealed that the Carpenters were my top artist of the year on Spotify Wrapped. I love the Carpenters, and I'm not alone. From the time they signed a contract at A&M Records in 1969 to Karen's death in 1983, the group notched 12 top 10 hits on the Billboard Hot 100, were nominated for 7 Grammys, won 3, and sold over 100 million records worldwide, ranking them as one of the best-selling music artists of all time. The band owed its success both to Richard's skills as an arranger and composer and to Karen's voice, which is like a warm bath of light, an audial opioid, an angel whispering into your ear. I'm a journalist, I simply report the facts. To fans, the Carpenters were a balm in troubled times. Lucy O'Brien, author of Lead Sister, The Story of Karen Carpenter, writes, "At a time when the Vietnam War divided the country, and the entranced energy of 1967's Summer of Love had dissipated into a darker period of violence and protest, the Carpenters' mellifluous sound was a panacea. We came out right in the middle of hard rock everywhere. It was such a turnaround, I guess a lot of people were waiting for something in that vein," Karen said later. Their lyrics did not allude to sex or drugs. The siblings were clean-cut, well-behaved. They didn't curse, sleep around, or get caught partying. They even lived with their parents for years after they became famous. While this virginal wholesomeness comforted some listeners, it struck others, in the words of CBS Mornings, as radioactively square. In a decade marked by mass movements for the advancement of women's civil and gay rights, by film and music that pushed the boundaries of what could be depicted or discussed, as popular as they were, the Carpenters seemed out of step with the cultural moment. They were not innovators, but a throwback, more Andrews Sisters than Janis Joplin. As O'Brien writes, the band became pigeonholed as bland and conservative, a reputation that became nearly impossible to shake after they accepted an invitation to perform at the White House in September 1972.
They're young America at its very best. Mr. Chancellor, knowing how you have such affection for young people all over the world and how you, as well as I, are working for the peace that we want for them, we think that tonight, having the Carpenters, one of America's finest young group in America, entertain us is most appropriate.
Truly nothing could make someone look less cool than a ringing endorsement from Richard Nixon. Fairly or not, the imagery stamped them for the rest of their lives as not rock, not counter anything. By the time Haynes and Schneider began filming Superstar, the group's persona had not evolved beyond this. Haynes hoped, however, that he could excavate a more nuanced image for the band, and for Karen specifically.
I was so completely earnestly invested in Karen Carpenter. Who she was, I felt like she deserved to be redeemed. There was this incredible sarcasm and dismissive attitude around her at the time. I realized that she wasn't the cultural joke everyone thought, and it made me that much sadder for what happened. There were obviously a lot of things she could have done with a voice like hers that she never got to try. At the time in New York, in the East Village, underground queer culture and drag culture were of course already immersed in a re-examination of pop and female iconography from the past and bringing it to a complicated camp sensibility. This often keyed into iconic subjects who experienced great suffering, like Judy Garland or Marilyn Monroe. But Karen Carpenter wasn't one of them yet, so we also felt a kind of pioneering spirit in bringing our own version of camp idolatry in our efforts to redeem Karen Carpenter. It was camp, it was queer, and it was punk. It was all of those things rolled into one.
Superstar began with extensive research. Haynes and Schneider learned all they could about the Carpenters, searching through archives, newspapers, and promotional materials. They even joined the official Carpenters fan club to access back issues of the organization's newsletters.
Todd and I prepared a whole timeline that included what their singles were, what we knew about the Carpenters, what we knew about her eating disorder, what was going on in their career, what was going on historically in the world from 1960-something to the 80s. All of that was made in the context of us trying to figure the film out.
Meanwhile, Haynes began crafting the world of the dolls, scaling everything down to create Karen's 12-inch life.
I made everything but the clothes. The costumes were based on specific famous outfits of Karen Carpenter from photographs or record covers. Those are made by my partner Bob Manetti's mother, who is a seamstress. Some of the women in the Bard program, all of whom were artists, brought in their old Barbie collections from home, which included vintage clothes and additional items they had made as kids. But I made all the tiny props and furniture, the sets, the gold records, the musical instruments, the recording booths and the sound studios, designed the hairstyles, and created the faces. Then we would arrange all the clothes and heads and hairdos according to the years covered in the film. The process of making it all was delightfully obsessive. It's probably the purest pleasure I've ever had making a film.
A majority of Superstar was filmed at Bard on about 10 sets, with Haynes, Schneider, Barry Ellsworth, and Robert Menenti moving the dolls before the camera. Additional footage was captured by Haynes and Schneider on the streets of New York City and on a trip to Downey, California, where they visited the Carpenters' actual family home and filmed throughout the area for exterior B-roll. Voices provided by Haynes and Schneider's friends from Brown were added in post-production. How long did the movie take to make?
I cut it in my apartment in Brooklyn on a Steenbeck that I rented. The whole film took about a year and a half from writing to completion while carrying on other jobs. So it was a really small group of maniacs working insane hours. I mean, the film was fun, but it was really hard. I underestimated how long everything would take.
When we come back, how the art world responded to Superstar, next on 2030.
Do you ever get a gay vibe from me?
I'm sick! Let's bake some cookies for the boys.
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
New shirts from Be Kind Rewind. Show off your summer style with this brand new vintage-inspired design. With worldwide shipping and sustainable fulfillment, it's the perfect gift for the cinephile in your life. Or a nice little treat for yourself. Available now. See the link in the description below. Superstar, the Karen Carpenter story, begins like a horror film. A dramatization, a point-of-view sequence in which Karen's mother, Agnes, discovers her lying unconscious on the floor. Let's go back, a narrator declares, to discover what happened, why a smooth-voiced girl from California who led a raucous nation into the 1970s died at the age of 32. For the next 40 minutes, the film tells the story of Karen and Richard Carpenter, the music they made and the world they lived in. Richard, in need of a singer for his band, overhears Karen singing in her bedroom. Although she's already his drummer, they need her singular, spectacular voice to succeed. Soon, they sign a contract with A&M Records, and the band skyrockets to the top of the charts. Karen begins to struggle with the demands of pop stardom and with finding her feet as an adult, independent from her family. She maintains a grueling tour schedule, lives under the watchful eye of her parents, and in search of something she personally can control, becomes increasingly obsessed with her relationship to food. Karen develops severe anorexia nervosa and eventually requires medical attention. Her treatment appears successful at first, but she returns to her home and her routines too soon. Her eating disorder reemerges and ultimately claims her life. I should mention two things up front. First, the quality of the versions of Superstar you will likely find do not look very good, and unsurprisingly, they are muddy in this video. We will get back to that. Second, Superstar is not a 100% factual account of the Carpenters' lives and careers. It's speculative, ambiguous, and abstract, and I'm sure there are very dedicated fans of the band who hate it for that reason, or just on principle simply because of its gimmick. However, I'd argue that you can get plenty out of this film with respect to the Carpenters, and even more so with respect to Haynes himself. Because although Haynes was basically fresh out of grad school when he made Superstar, it nevertheless showcases many of the themes and interests he has continued to explore throughout his filmography. Haynes has written that his work reflects a strong interest in popular form combined with a strong desire to invert it, which is maybe the best way to describe the somewhat indescribable Superstar. As stated earlier, the film was conceived as a formal exercise. Haynes wanted to see if, by following recognizable formulas of genre, he could get the audience to identify or empathize with a plastic figure that could make no expressions or even move in a normal human manner. So Superstar was written to hit the traditional beats of the pop star biopic. We see the montage of the Carpenters climbing to the top, complete with spinning headlines, performances, excitement over big opportunities, etc. And although it's filmed on miniaturized sets, Superstar is also filmed rather conventionally. Shot, reverse shot, pans, zooms, it's all there. But this being Todd Haynes, it's not all so straightforward as that. His interest in subverting genre also often leads him to blend genres. So while Superstar hits the beats of the pop star biopic, it also includes sequences that evoke educational documentaries and horror films. For example, Haynes utilizes stylistic conventions of horror to characterize Karen's first encounter with A&M Records as predatory, in order to showcase the exploitative nature of show business.
We'll take real good care of you. All you have to do is put yourself in my hands.
Haynes also uses the actual dolls to incorporate horror into the visual language of the film. As the film progresses, the dolls' faces become gradually more grotesque or damaged to reflect inner rot. Agnes and Richard's faces are burned and distorted, or to symbolize the literal decay of Karen's body.
We carved down the plastic cheeks of the doll head. These dolls were extremely thin already, but the faces were kind of round, so I wanted to carve down the cheeks and then cover it over with pancake makeup and have very creepy effects.
But of course, if we're talking about how Superstar subverts the biopic genre, we have to talk about the dolls, commodities to be consumed, controlled, and which have come to represent a controlling force culturally as well.
Barbie's a loaded cultural icon that stands for a whole prescribed femininity that little girls are confronted with at an early age.
This generalized, prescriptive femininity gains a much more specific meaning when applied to the life of Karen Carpenter, whose relationship with femininity, or more specifically, femininity as defined by the 60s and 70s, was more complex than is often recognized. This subject could go a number of different ways. For instance, a lot of writing about Karen's childhood emphasizes her tomboyishness.
Now, Richard, while you were inside playing piano, Karen, you were outside playing baseball, right?
Yeah.
What position did you play?
I like to pitch.
I understand you did there with the neighborhood team. They were all guys, and you played. And for both of you...
But Karen most substantially confronted traditional notions of femininity with her drumming, which in the 1960s and 70s was for boys. She began playing as a teenager, quickly fell in love with it, and became insanely good very quickly. I see the drums as Karen's soulmate in a way, just like that thing that really fulfilled her in a very natural, easy way. Karen never really got the recognition she deserved for her drumming, partly because her voice was so obviously extraordinary, but also because she was considered a drummer with an asterisk to denote her femininity.
After Wes Jacobs joined the Detroit Symphony, you, Richard, started a new group called the Spectrum, with Karen added as the group's novelty, a girl drummer, not a baseball player this time.
Karen had a few peers, Mo Tucker of the Velvet Underground and Sandy West of the Runaways, for example. But even among them, she stands apart as both the sole female in her band and also as the lead singer. Mainstream/lead singer fame creates a different kind of pressure than an all-female rock group or an underground scene known to be more accepting of androgyny. Karen played drums for the Carpenters throughout the band's existence, but as time went on, she increasingly spent more time singing and less time playing drums. Audiences apparently want to see a lead singer stand in front of their band, so Richard and A&M persuaded Karen to come out from behind her kit and play that role more actively. However, she was not naturally inclined to do that, so this process was much more difficult and lengthy than is depicted in the film. As the film says, in a culture that continues to control women through the commoditization of their bodies, the anorexic body excludes itself, rejecting the doctrines of femininity driven by a vision of complete mastery and control. Superstar takes great pains to explain that anorexia isn't necessarily about body image, but rather a complex combination of factors. Still, it's worth considering how Barbie's oft-discussed proportions take on a different meaning when representing a woman who suffered from anorexia. According to the National Eating Disorders Association, it is virtually impossible for a real woman to achieve Barbie's build, and if she did, she would fit the weight criteria for anorexia. This topic has launched a gajillion articles about body image and changed the way Mattel approaches their builds, and I think more diverse bodies for Barbie is great, although I don't always think realism is necessary when it comes to children's toys, lest you end up with no! But we can't ignore Barbie's cultural impact beyond fantasy child's play. That by now, Barbie isn't just a toy, but also a pervasive idea about actual womanhood, a human woman stereotype that sometimes affects the way women think about themselves physically. For instance, when you Google Barbie arms, as I did to source images for this video, you don't get pictures of the toy, you get pictures of a cosmetic surgery that makes your arms look more like the doll's. It's an image obsession to reflect a fake ideal, to, as Rhonda Lieberman writes, expose the American dream of becoming an image rather than a self. The image versus the real self, life as role play, what something is versus what it looks like. Ultimately, the use of dolls doesn't just make an interesting metaphor for the life of Karen Carpenter, it also sets a tonal affect for the film. Camp. Superstar puts Karen in quotation marks to a much greater degree than the average biopic. And sometimes this turns into humor. Haynes occasionally calls attention to the mechanics of the production. An arm answers a phone in a way that we intuitively understand would normally be impossible for a doll. It's funny and strange, but to me, that isn't failed seriousness. It's what makes Haynes' formal exercise so successful. The gag hits because you're so absorbed in the film that you've briefly forgotten you're watching dolls. I think due in part to some incredible voice acting by Meryl Groover as Karen and Michael Sean Edwards as Richard. So the film has this self-aware sense of humor, but many critics noted upon the film's release how deeply serious it actually is. The Barbie device and the midnight movie venue may raise the wrong expectations. You don't come out laughing. Superstar doesn't treat Karen Carpenter as a joke. The campy incongruities between appearance and reality also come into play in the way Haynes frames Karen's home life. It might seem counterintuitive to describe Superstar as a suburban melodrama. After all, the Carpenters were, pardon the pun, superstars. Still, as famous as they were, their brand honed in on their supposed ordinariness.
Karen and Richard Carpenter. Just a couple of kids next door.
Their parents figured prominently in their press coverage. Their fan newsletters featured Karen's favorite recipes and stuffed animals. The cover of their 1973 album, Now and Then, a title suggested by their mother, features their actual family home, etc. In the cultural imagination, their territory was a suburban domestic space, or at least as much as is possible for an internationally famous pop duo. Haynes certainly seems to see things that way because he invests most heavily in designing and depicting domestic spaces in Superstar. The film's most harrowing scenes occur not on stages or celebrity-filled bars or on talk shows, but in living rooms, bedrooms, and bathrooms. Annette Pick writes, "To Haynes, suburbia is a space in which the American dream simultaneously lives and dies," which couldn't be more true of Karen Carpenter. Here we have two famous, successful, prodigiously talented siblings sold to the American public as living a clean, unburdened life at home. For Haynes, the Carpenters are emblematic of a broader truth, that the idyllic imagination of suburbia masks an environment rife with incurable fears and deep-seated paranoia. It's telling that Haynes packaged Superstar with his films Safe and Far From Heaven in a collection of screenplays, viewing them as a connected trio. All three of these films can be seen as melodramas, he wrote in the introduction. Each is the story of a woman struggling within the constraints of domestic life, each of whom surrenders in one way or another to its authority, and each are films that articulate emotion through the corridors of style. Beneath their lush, teeming surfaces are claustrophobic stories of disillusionment and resignation, of women locked up in houses who emerge in the end as lesser human beings for all they surrender to the ways of the world. In Superstar, the disillusionment and resignation stem from Karen's loss of control. As Michael Koreski wrote for Film Comment, by representing Karen Carpenter as a doll, the film becomes inescapably about bearing witness to the gradual ravaging of a body and those who took away that body's agency. The film suggests her parents, particularly Agnes, have an oppressive stranglehold over her life, insisting she remain home at the age of 25, monitoring her money and image, and questioning her methods of recovery. The film also frames Richard as a controlling force in her professional life. Richard realizes that, despite his crucial, somewhat unsung role in making the band what it was, Karen holds the keys to their success. When confronted with her illness, he lashes out insensitively.
What are you trying to do? Ruin both our careers?
As depicted by Haynes, Richard also fails to recognize that Karen, the lead singer and sole female in their entire band, had to bear burdens he never did. How she looked, behaved, performed, and never pauses to empathize with the pressure she faces. For Haynes, the Carpenters' music also unlocked a way of imagining this underlying disillusionment. Karen had such an upbeat, goofy personality in interviews, pulling faces, joking around, always putting a positive spin on everything. But her performances had a deep, warm sensitivity that suggested emotional experience, maturity, and an inner life that perhaps had no other satisfying means of expressing itself.
At first, those songs seem banal and manipulative and overly sentimental, but there's also something in her voice, in her body, that had a connection to authentic sadness that initially people didn't take seriously. Later, because of what did happen to her and the way that it was reframed, you had to listen differently to that voice.
Were there or are there many female drummers? Well, not too many. You've probably been an inspiration, though. I think, gee, if she could do it, we could try. Well, when I got into it, I didn't know anybody else. And the initial statement was, girls don't play drums, but I never stopped to think that they don't. I didn't see no reason why I couldn't.
As we've seen, Todd Haynes and Cynthia Schneider painstakingly created a complex portrait of Karen Carpenter, not with actors, but with dolls. How would this strange, subversive film be received? At first, Superstar was rejected by some of the most prominent screening venues in New York City, the Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and Film Forum, to name a few. Instead, it screened at venues in the underground scene, premiering at Film Charas on July 28, 1987.
It stuck around in New York City in the East Village. We paid for the Millennium. They didn't even want to show it themselves. We rented it ourselves so that we could have it shown one other place than Film Charas. And then we showed it at the Pyramid Club and had kind of a Karen Carpenter drag night. Those were the three places that it premiered.
And then certain critics helped it along?
Yes, I sent out a press release to Jim Hoberman at the Village Voice, Barbara Kruger at Art Forum, among others. They both liked the film a lot and decided to feature it. Hoberman's lead review that week in the Village Voice and Kruger's exclusive piece in Art Forum that month changed my standing as a filmmaker overnight.
Haynes is a formidable talent. He's receiving attention for his short films at a time when the experimental underground is only experiencing mild tremors. It's this joining of parody with deathly bodily abjection that makes for the film's tension, allowing it to engage both social critique, and the cathartic dispensations and distancing of laughter.
Hoberman and Kruger gave the film legitimacy, visibility, and cultural currency, and it found a bigger audience right away. As more critics gained access, some dismissed it at face value. The Los Angeles Times, for example, wondered whatever happened to Rest in Peace. But most were impressed by Haynes' formal achievements, conceding the film offered a nuanced perspective on Karen's story and female celebrity, both in spite of and because of its use of dolls. Superstar takes you on a journey from its own outrageousness and your own presumed contempt for Carpenter, who has come more or less to stand for the textureless white bread culture of the 1970s, as viewed from the vaunted platform of 80s hipness to what is eventually tragedy. Carpenter's pain was real, and the movie embraces it and makes it quite dramatically authentic. Crucially, Haynes' interpretation reframed Karen's celebrity within the East Village crowd who had dismissed her. He succeeded in eliciting sympathy for Carpenter from a sector that had always scorned her, the underground left. One paper, in recommending it, advised, "Whisper to your friends that you've seen it." According to Lucas Hildebrand, author of Grainy Days and Mondays, Superstar, and Bootleg Aesthetics, Superstar became the rage of downtown New York in 1987, almost to the point of saturation. When Art Forum retrospectively looked at the 1980s art scene, Superstar was singled out as one of the two featured milestones for the year. Andy Warhol's death was the other. Before long, Superstar was being programmed at museums, looped in gallery installations, universities integrated into feminist film curriculums, film festivals, including the Utah Film Festival, later renamed Sundance, and even at eating disorder clinics as an educational and discussion aid. For 2 years, the film enjoyed broad success and freedom. But Haynes had an aching sense that it couldn't last forever.
All along, I was really nervous. I knew we were headed for trouble. As soon as it got out in the press, it just seemed inevitable.
This just in, Barbie is a massive global brand heavily invested in how its products are portrayed. Haynes & Company did not ask Mattel for permission to feature the most valuable character in its portfolio in their film. For a personal project, their oversight might have gone unnoticed, but a short film about one of America's most beloved pop vocalists making the rounds at prominent film festivals and screening venues was something else altogether. Mattel had to step in.
Mattel wrote us a series of super scary cease and desist copyright lawyer letters. The main thing I remember was the letter saying, "You are associating our product with death."
I even received copies of the patents to all the individual parts comprising the Barbie body. Talk about cultural ownership of the female body. There was literally a blueprint of the Barbie arm, the Barbie torso, the Barbie leg. Unbelievable.
The team behind Superstar had reason to hope, however. They believed that Haynes' use of Barbies might constitute fair use, a legal doctrine that promotes freedom of expression by permitting the unlicensed use of copyright-protected works in certain circumstances, such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use generally considers whether the copyrighted work is sufficiently transformed, how much of the copyrighted work is used, whether the market value of the copyrighted work is harmed, etc. I am not a lawyer. Please read more here. For one thing, many of the dolls Haynes used were not actually Mattel products.
Todd bought all those dolls in garage sales. They were Barbie ripoffs, so he was able to prove to Mattel that it was an off-brand. That it wasn't Barbie, but it was what you got if your parents couldn't afford Barbie.
Additionally, they argued that any actual Mattel products used in the film had been sufficiently transformed through physical alterations, the horror effects applied to Karen, for example, therefore adding something new with a further purpose, and not substituting for the original work.
The doll that portrays Karen is the Tracy doll.
Tracy's getting married today. Barbie's the bridesmaid, and Todd is the groom. New Tracy Todd and
A Ken doll
Angel
does
Face
portray
Barbie.
Richard, but he has various wigs and hair pieces throughout the film, and by the end of the film, we changed his face a lot, so it's no longer a Ken doll. The thing about Barbie is, and this is true for some of the dolls we had, you can pop their heads off and stick another head on. We did all kinds of endless reconstructions, Frankensteining little bodies.
Haynes seemingly anticipated Mattel's concerns and had been careful to avoid associating the film with the Barbie brand when marketing it. Significantly, writes Hildebrand, Haynes' press release for Superstar's first 3 screenings acknowledged its outlaw status in the first sentence. Superstar is an unauthorized film using Barbie-sized dolls.
I think we always said Barbie-like dolls or starring dolls.
Haynes offered a number of concessions in a good faith effort to compromise with Mattel, including adding a disclaimer at the beginning of the film that the dolls had nothing to do with the brand. But the company never pursued legal action against Haynes. They had a much more consequential copyright battle raging in Japan over Jenny dolls. And knew that Haynes faced more serious problems elsewhere.
As soon as they understood that there were unresolved music rights, they just disappeared. They knew that a much bigger corporate interest was about to seize the project.
According to Peter DeCherney, author of Hollywood's Copyright Wars from Edison to the Internet, throughout the 1960s and 70s, an unspoken fair use code structured avant-garde film and the avant-garde community. Filmmakers enjoyed almost complete freedoms from claims of copyright infringement as long as their work circulated only among the underground community. Even when their work reached more formal venues, filmmakers could remain confident that film studios would not bother them. Andy Warhol, for example, safely utilized popular characters like Tarzan and Batman, or at least he ostensibly did. However, another unwritten rule applied much more directly to Superstar. While underground filmmakers might get away with visual fair use, music was another story. DeCherney writes, even if there was no case law, filmmakers and audiences understood the code. You could not use popular music, and certainly not entire songs, if you intended to show your film at prominent venues. The gatekeepers in this community were film festival programmers, and they helped enforce the rule. This was a huge reason prominent venues initially resisted screening Superstar. Haynes and Schneider inserted full versions of songs not only by the Carpenters, but Elton John and Gilbert O'Sullivan, using them not only to situate the audience at specific points in the band's timeline, but also to comment on Karen's state of mind and create tonal irony. We've Only Just Begun plays as the Carpenters' first album takes off. This Masquerade plays as Karen's marriage falls apart. Sing plays over Richard Nixon as the Watergate scandal erupts.
We wanted the Carpenters' music. There was a certain point early on, it was like, well, you could get people to do covers of their music, but you can't tell the story without Karen Carpenter's voice.
Prior to finishing the film, Haynes made a last-minute, half-hearted attempt to secure the rights to the Carpenters' music. He wrote a letter to Richard Carpenter's representative that summarized Superstar, explained it was a student film that would not be screened for commercial purposes, and emphasized that it was sympathetic to Karen. 2 months later, Richard Carpenter's representative replied that Haynes could not make the film, use the songs, or portray any biographical information. To quote a viral video,
"What the fuck, Richard?"
But at that point, Haynes had come too far with the project. He wasn't going to give in so easily.
They said, no, you're going to have to abort this project. I thought, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to kill the project. I'm going to show it. I'll have my one screening.
He did, and many more. But eventually, Haynes' willful defiance caught up with him.
I was officially approached by 3 entities: A&M Records, Richard Carpenter's publishing company, and the estate for the family, in the form of 3 scary letters of cease and desist.
The letters accused Superstar of unauthorized use of the Carpenters' logo, images, life story, and music. Music presented a far more serious copyright problem than Haynes had faced with Mattel. Haynes could claim that he utilized the Carpenters' songs in a critical or commentary capacity. However, because the film includes nearly full versions of every song, it would be extremely difficult to argue that he significantly transformed the original work, or that he made a genuine effort to minimize use of the original work where possible.
There is a lot of music. It's like 28 minutes. It's not snippets. By that point, I was in law school and knew people who did intellectual property, trying to see if there were some fair use arguments. But I knew how serious a problem we had.
We went back to them with a modest request, since by that time the film was being shown in courses on feminist film theory, at anorexia organizations as a teaching tool, places I'd never expected the film to be used for.
Haynes hoped he could appeal to Richard Carpenter's Better Angels and attempted to negotiate the following terms. He requested that Superstar should be available for non-commercial and non-theatrical showings as a pedagogical tool in schools and health clinics, and offered to donate all monies from rentals of the film to the Karen Carpenter Foundation for Anorexia Research. His appeal was denied. The terms of the cease and desist demanded that Superstar could not be screened in public places. Haynes was ordered to stop the circulation of the film by any means necessary, including recalling copies from video stores. Critics were dismayed. Owen Gleiberman even wrote an open letter to Richard Carpenter in Entertainment Weekly, begging him, "Will you please allow people to see Todd Haynes' Superstar, the Karen Carpenter story? By putting the light and dark sides of Karen Carpenter together, Superstar, like David Lynch's Blue Velvet, says something powerful and haunting about America, about a place where an existence this tragic could fuel music with so much soulfulness and grace." Todd Haynes has turned Karen Carpenter's life into a singular work of art. Even for those who never cared about the Carpenters' music, but especially for those who did, it deserves to be seen. In the wake of the cease and desist, Superstar became a cautionary tale. The story circulated widely and portended a closing down of a previously unfettered fair use environment, DeCherney writes. Filmmakers became more cautious about their use of music and other copyrighted material. Accounts of avant-garde video and the art world of the time regularly cite Superstar as emblematic of the narrowing of fair use. Still, while copyright technically took Superstar down, the swiftness and severity of the ban gave the impression that the music wasn't Richard's only problem with the film, because, as DeCherney writes, Superstar remains a rare case. Aside from Superstar, he explains, I have not located any avant-garde videos that have received legal pressure of any kind during this period.
I don't think they even saw the film initially, and I don't know when they ultimately did, but without seeing the film, it's impossible to imagine it being sympathetic or compassionate regarding Karen Carpenter, a movie told with Barbie dolls. And even when they did see it, the depictions of Richard Carpenter and their mother were cast as adversaries to Karen's needs, compounding the family dilemmas that can fuel anorexic behavior. So, I understood why that was going to happen to the movie.
Perhaps copyright was a convenient tool to strike back against a potentially inconvenient truth. Perhaps the unflattering portrait painted by Haynes threatened the tidy, idyllic image the Carpenters had so fastidiously cultivated. Even in death, Karen's image was governed by her brother and her record label. I'm not trying to be glib about this. To some degree, I get it. We shouldn't minimize how difficult this must have been for Richard, who has openly admitted he knows he didn't do everything right with respect to Karen's illness. I can't imagine I'd be comfortable seeing a POV shot of my mother discovering my dead sister's body, or seeing her slow death replicated with dolls. On some level, isn't wanting to swipe back against something like that just a few years after her death understandable? It was Karen's life, but it was his life too. In 1988, Richard oversaw a different narrativized portrayal of Karen's life. He executive produced the Karen Carpenter story, a television movie that adheres much more tightly to the facts of the Carpenters' ascent. How they were discovered, their life in Downey, the arc of their career, Karen's attempt at a solo album, even Richard's Quaalude addiction, which Haynes didn't know about at the time of filming Superstar. They filmed in the actual family home in Downey. The actress playing Karen wore her actual clothes. The Downey EMT that takes fictional Karen's body away were the same ones who took the real Karen's body away. Yet, despite these details that ostensibly make the film more true to life, it feels toothless and sanitized. As the critic at the San Francisco Examiner put it, TV isn't all that equipped to deal with the family issues surrounding anorexia. And the TV movie ended up making Karen into more of a Barbie doll than Superstar does. Undoubtedly, behind-the-scenes pressure influenced the way the film approached these complex topics. According to Lucy O'Brien, there was tension over how the family would be represented, and Richard was a constant presence on set. When the film's screenwriter, Barry Morrow, visited the Carpenter family for research, the first thing Agnes said to him was, "I want you to know I did not kill my daughter, so take from that what you will." Morrow was asked to rewrite his script 4 times, and when he was asked to write a 5th draft in December 1988, he refused, and another writer, Cynthia Cherback, was brought in to soften the edges of Agnes's character. This makes me laugh because, a really good way to make your mother seem like a more sympathetic authority figure is to cast the woman most famous for playing Nurse Ratched. Anyway, O'Brien writes, although Richard had been involved with the film at every stage, he was unhappy with the outcome, later dismissing it as 90 minutes of creative license that give biopics in general a dubious tone. In her comparison of Haynes's film and the made-for-TV depiction of Karen's life, Mary Desjardins grapples with the complications that arise from trying to represent a star subject. Biographies can provide crucial sites of contestation over historical meaning, she writes. Karen's story and its context raise questions about how certain figures become representative, idealized, and claimed. Who has the right to tell a story, particularly when the subject can no longer speak for herself? The person who most intimately knew the subject but might have an incentive to hide the ugly details? Or someone who fictionalizes details in order to extrapolate larger truths from the subject's life? Both? Does public interest justify overstepping boundaries of privacy? Questions of representation continue to this day. Lucy Arnaz openly refuting Aaron Sorkin's depiction of her mother, Lucille Ball. Hulu moving forward with Pam and Tommy despite Pamela Anderson's obvious discomfort with revisiting that trauma. Bohemian Rhapsody inelegantly framing queer life in the 1980s as a series of illicit encounters between concerts. I'm not necessarily equating Superstar with any of those films. It's on a completely different level in my mind, but all contribute to important conversations about how we balance artistic representation, truth, and entertainment in these kinds of stories. This has been a theme in many of Haynes's films. Velvet Goldmine about kind of David Bowie and I'm Not There about Bob Dylan come to mind. But his latest film, May December, reflects specifically on how an artist considers her own role in representing a subject. Natalie Portman plays an actress studying the woman she will play in a biopic, played by Julianne Moore. This is a film about performance, too, and how exploitative playing the role of a real-life person can be.
Absolutely. I think Sammy Birch, the screenwriter, was having fun taking shots at the culture of privilege with actors and getting to the truth and being in possession of that. Whether it's a real person or a living person, the act of telling stories, of creating stories that are not real but made to look real and provoke an emotional reaction, there's something corrupt about it all. I don't know if it's a clean medium or an ethical process.
Haynes, thankfully, did not have to pay damages to the Carpenter estate, but damage was done nevertheless. The film that put Todd Haynes on the map had to disappear in order to comply with the terms of the cease and desist. Superstar was dead for good. Or was it? The Streisand effect, a phenomenon in which an attempt to censor, hide, or otherwise draw attention away from something only serves to attract more attention to it. The name derives from American singer and actress Barbra Streisand's lawsuit against a photographer in 2003, which drew attention to the photo she was suing to have taken off the internet. Psychologist Carly Dober states, when people encounter attempts to suppress information, they are more likely to share it widely as an act of resistance, bolstered by a collective sense of injustice. The social validation and reinforcement from peers further encourage individuals to participate in spreading the censored content. Richard Carpenter's suppression of Superstar altered the film's cultural currency overnight, transforming it from an innovative work by a promising young filmmaker to an innovative work by a promising young filmmaker that you weren't supposed to see. Forcefully silencing Haynes suggested controversy lay within the film that only inspired more curiosity.
What's wrong? Do the Carpenters have something to hide?
The problem for the Carpenters was that the toothpaste was already out of the tube. By the time the gavel came down on Haynes, Hildebrand writes, tapes circulated among film industry folks. Preview tapes had gone out to press and curators. Haynes also sold approximately 60 VHS copies of the film through Amok Bookstore in Los Angeles, and bootlegs were already available in alternative video stores across the country. Removing the film from circulation raised the profile of these copies by introducing scarcity. It discouraged casual encounters with the work in museums or coursework, and instead encouraged the treatment of these copies as contraband or a collectible, a highly sought-after prize for cinephiles to encounter and acquire for themselves. A legend had been born.
A friend of mine worked at a video store, and she said there was always a shelf in the back with a VHS copy that couldn't be rented. One night she borrowed it after she locked up for the night. We watched together and I cried and cried. A truly formative experience for me.
The most accessible prints of Superstar are copies of copies of copies, each duplicate gradually deteriorating the image resolution and audio quality. For some viewers, the degraded image has become a crucial part of the experience. Glyn Davis writes, for those who bootleg films or who access illegal copies of films, the battered and worn tape aesthetics identify the content as illicit, as contraband. Paradoxically, this degraded aesthetic may thus actually enrich the viewing experience. Audiences familiar with Superstar from pirate copies of the movie can be surprised and disappointed when they see a better quality print.
I first watched the film in 1998 when I rented it from Mondo Video, which kept a second or third generation dupe behind the counter. The picture was dark and boggy, and the soundtrack seemed as if it were recorded on a boombox inside a washing machine. A couple of years later, I was lucky enough to borrow a pristine straight-from-the-print copy from a friend, but there was experiential value in that first frustrated viewing. If you're trying to get at something that's forbidden, maybe it should feel like your ear is pressed to a wall.
UCLA and Sundance recently remastered Superstar, bringing the film back to its original glory, and I have to say the restoration is beautiful. The colors are bright, Karen's costumes glitter, you can really drink in every detail of the production design and the grotesqueness of the dolls, you can actually read the text. I have seen Todd Haynes introduce that version, and he said he knows some people prefer the experience of the degraded image, but that he loves seeing it the way it was intended to look. But wait, did I just say that I've seen this film in a theater? Yes. Haynes managed to secure a clause in the legal agreement that would allow for screenings of Superstar in one specific context. Haynes may screen the film in relation to the rest of his oeuvre. Venues can't advertise these screenings or sell tickets, but if you're lucky and know how to look, you might just find one. Now, as a freak who has seen 2 of the 3 total public screenings of Superstar that have happened in New York City in the last decade, here's what to look for. Keep an eye out for vague, suggestive titles, something like Todd Haynes' early shorts. Typically, these listings advertise Dottie Gets Spanked or The Suicide, both of which are great and worth your time on their own merits, by the way. But the runtime will be suspiciously longer than it would be if just those shorts were playing. Approximately 43 minutes longer. These public screenings are annoyingly rare. As I said, 3 in the past decade in New York City. But it's possible that someday that beautiful restoration of Superstar will be widely available for circulation.
There have been some legal opinions written about the film that seem favorable to a way through, but there's a lot more work that I need to do that I haven't had time to, which is annotate the film and provide all of the sources of information and so forth. It'll happen. It's not something we're working on at the moment, but it's going to happen. It'll happen, yeah.
What lies in the future is a mystery to us all. For now, Superstar remains, all at once, a groundbreaking avant-garde work, a sympathetic reframing of a songstress gone too soon, and a cautionary tale of the narrowing of fair use. May it see the light of day once more someday soon. And in the meantime, I will think of Karen this way, having the time of her life behind a set of drums. Superstar wasn't the last time Todd Haynes stirred a little controversy. When Haynes received $25,000 from the National Endowment for the Arts to complete his first feature film, Poison, he found himself at the center of a debate about federal funding of the arts. Conservatives viciously attacked him and the film, and one even said that he'd seen more artistically meritorious productions on America's Funniest Home Videos, before slandering it as perverse, denigrating, violent, and homoerotic. Despite how truly tame and sensitive Poison is, the MPAA slapped an NC-17 rating on it, citing it as explicit sexuality, aka it's about gay people. This is exactly the kind of uproar, cultural conservatism, and censorship that Maggie Mae Fish talks about on her show Unrated, which dives into the history of sex, sexuality, and gender in film, from the silent era to sexploitation to modern erotic movies. There's a great episode, for example, about how director David Lean wove queer themes throughout his filmography, from his early work with Noel Coward on Brief Encounter to the homoerotic subtext of Lawrence of Arabia. And by the way, if you like Maggie Mae Fish, you might want to keep an eye out for her new show, Amy's Dream House, a new series that follows Amy and her apartment full of appliances as they encounter all kinds of adult problems, from mental illness to job hunting to impossible beauty standards to your guy friends getting red-pilled. Just like Superstar, it shows that you really can tackle serious topics with inanimate objects and have fun while doing it. Unrated is streaming right now, and Amy's Dream House will premiere on July 13th exclusively on Nebula. Nebula is an independent, creator-owned streaming platform specializing in thoughtful content. There are amazing perks to becoming a Nebula subscriber. First of all, everything on Nebula is ad-free. Plus, creators often post exclusive content or give early access to their latest work. That exclusive content is really the exciting stuff, in my opinion. Sometimes it's just one-off ideas that creators have been itching to make, but there are an increasing number of prestige projects that you really can't watch anywhere else and that challenge creators like myself to push themselves to the next level creatively. Amy's Dreamhouse is a great example of that. Like, she got Katya, you guys. Katya. You can get all of that amazing content and everything else on Nebula for just $3 a month, a 40% discount when you sign up for an annual plan at go.nebula.tv/BeKindRewind. Once you've fallen in love with Nebula, you can pass on the good word by snagging some gift cards for your friends or even sharing week-long guest passes so they can experience Nebula without having to input any credit card information. And if you're really loving your experience, you can get a lifetime subscription. Pay once, never think about it again. Log in and enjoy forever, no matter what. So go ahead and check out this QR code right here, or click the link in the description below to grab your discount, support this channel, and explore all of the amazing work these creators are doing.